Now, the Toyota Innova Hycross redefines an iconic name. It's now a hybrid and it's now based on a new front-driven monocoque architecture. But is it still an Innova in the truest sense? So let's get right down to driving it to find out. The hybrid Innova Hycross uses a 2-liter Atkinson cycle petrol motor that puts out 154 PS and 190 Nm. That pairs with a 113 PS and 206 Nm electric motor with an e-CVT in the mix for a combined 186 PS. Lower spec models get a 2-liter naturally aspirated petrol with 174 PS and 202 Nm, again paired with the CVT. Now the Innova Hycross is now a hybrid, which by itself is a big step away from the diesel Innovas that you've become so used to. But it must be said that again, like the rest of the car, it kind of works. So the 186 PS, it feels like 186 PS. You don't feel that lack of mid-range torque all that much. You only feel it, say, at higher speeds on the highway, where you want to make that fast overtake or just close gap. So there you do miss that strong mid-range diesel punch. But aside from that, in most other conditions, that EV powertrain, the 1.31 kilowatt-hour battery that sits underneath, that's doing a very good job of, accentuating that 2-liter petrol engine. So in regular slow-moving traffic, that electric motor, which is powered by this 1.31 kilowatt-hour battery pack, is doing a great job. So you, as with all these Toyota systems, hybrid systems, you start off almost always on electric power. So you have that typical, very easily accessible torque that an EV has. So it just moves off the line very cleanly, quite briskly in fact. And then of course the petrol motor kicks in, it does so seamlessly, quite seamlessly. There's no loud clatters or clangs coming in. So that is very good. And then when you do pick up speed like we are right now, you notice that the CVT is also quite intuitively tuned. So of course when you step on the gas, there is that drone, that CVT drone, but there's also forward motion, so that dissociation is not that much. So yeah, you do have a clean linear power band as with most of these hybrids. So it really does make making progress quite easy. Yeah, you might find it to be quite different from that typical diesel performance with that, where you ride that wave of mid-range torque. It's different from that. You have to drive the Hycross a bit differently, let it build speed, let the electric motor do its thing. But you do notice that there is enough performance. The 0 to 100 time of 9.5 seconds seems fairly believable, so it's not a slow car by any means. So it'll keep up in traffic, it'll do your highway road trips pretty easily. And then of course the big advantage of this is that 21.1 kilometer per liter fuel efficiency. Of course in the real world you'll get less than that. We've done some very heavy driving and we're still getting 15, which is a big achievement considering how big this car is and how heavy it is. So yeah, you do have, in a sense, the best of both worlds. You have a fairly smooth powertrain and you have good efficiency. The Eco, Normal and Power modes don't alter outputs, so even in the most conservative setting, the Hycross is perfectly usable. There is an S gearbox mode that brings a touch more urgency in the way the Hycross moves, but a braking mode for the gearbox would have been more useful. There is some engine braking effect built into this powertrain, but the near one-pedal function that this provides in the Hyrider would have been a good fit for the Hycross too. We also would have liked the brake pedal to have a bit more feedback initially, but you get used to that early dead spot in its travel eventually. Far from feeling wallowy, the new Innova feels quite adept around a winding road. Body roll is kept in check and the long, wide car does a good job of hiding its mass here, as well as, if not better than, similarly sized SUVs. This sense is further enhanced by the steering tune. It's not overly light at city speeds but feels precise. This sense only grows at higher speeds, where you always feel in tune with the car's motion. Now this second row is really where you want to be in the Innova Hycross. And moving to the monocoque architecture, there have been some changes. The most notable of which is that it can't quite take those low speed sharp bumps as well as the Cresta could. So there is some bit of sharpness which is typical of these monocoque SUVs, if you will, comes through. But other than that, once you've picked up speed once, the road smoothens out, especially on a highway like this. The Hycross feels every bit like an Innova should. So you have that really strong sense of road holding, the sense of sure-footedness, the sense of solidity that you expect in an Innova. So as a long distance machine, the Hycross is at least in terms of ride quality, as good as an Innova has ever been. Now as for the comfort inside while you're moving, these seats, they are now a bit wider, they have that bit more support, but more importantly you get this massive legroom that you see, which has come from that 100 increase in the wheelbase, which has opened up so much space here. But it doesn't just stop there. Toyota has really gone to town with the features in the second row. So you get this powered ottoman, of course, for that added comfort. Although with the battery pack now placed under the front seats, there's a bit less legroom, if you will. Of course, the knee room and the headroom is good enough still. And then you can recline this seat back as well. And you can recline it to quite an extreme angle. So you can lie pretty much flat. And then we come to the features that are on offer. So you have a specific climate zone for the second and the third row. You get this ambient lighting. You get this panoramic sunroof. And then of course you have this center console where, like now we put the phone, these snacks. And then of course there's a great addition for India, these sunshades. So as a comfortable place to spend time in, the Innova Hycross really has taken a significant step forward in the second row. The Toyota Innova Hycross is now based on the TNGA C high architecture, which it shares with Japanese market MPVs like the Noah and Voxy. This crucial shift is most apparent when you step inside the Hycross. The cabin is nothing like the simple, functional ones we've seen before in an Innova. The horizontally themed dash is again quite SUV-like, with its large, freestanding central screen and more ergonomic layout. The quality of materials have also improved noticeably, with the soft brown surfaces on the dash face and doors, as well as the quilted upholstery. The switchgear feels better damped, and the hard plastics, though still with that typical hard-wearing texture you are accustomed to in a Toyota, seem better tempered by the new design. Now it's a bit of a step to get into the front row of the Innova Hycross, considering the battery pack makes the floor a bit higher. But once you're here, it's a great place to spend time in. So for example, the seats, they're wide, they're supportive, they're cooled as well as powered, at least the driver's seat is. So finding a nice, comfortable driving position is not difficult at all. And then when you look forward, you realize that you can see the edges of the bonnet quite clearly. This raked windscreen has opened up a large quarter glass, and the sill itself is also quite low, so you can see very clearly all around. And then you notice that the steering wheel, it's the new style Toyota one, very nice to hold, hard buttons, these paddle shifters are there. And then you have the 7-inch MID, which is again useful. It's got a crisp display and it shows you pretty much everything that you need to know about the car, about how the hybrid system is working, how the ADAS is working and so on. And then when you come to this 10.1-inch display, it's of course a big improvement from what was there in the Cresta, but it's a basic one in terms of functionality. It will connect your phone, it will connect your Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and give you all the settings around it. There's no functioning of the car's controls through it really. In that sense, it works just fine. But Toyota has paid special attention to how practical the Innova is to use on the move, which is why you see that quite unlike most modern cars, there's hard buttons for everything. The climate controls, the ventilated seats, and all the functions, the 360-degree camera, the electronic parking brake, the auto hold, the drive modes, they all get hard buttons, and they're tactile buttons which feel very good to use, so they're very easy to use on the move. And then this column mounted gear shifter, it's not something you see very often, but again, it does help practicality. It opens up this large center console where you can put your water bottles and so on. They're deep, big pockets, same with the ones in the doors, and this large, quite deep cubby hole actually. So in terms of practicality and space in the front row, the Innova Hycross really does score quite high. There's quite a long list of features to go with this. Wireless charging is an accessory, but you get LED lighting, auto headlamps, auto wipers, powered mirrors, a 9-speaker JBL sound system, ambient lighting, connected tech, and a panoramic sunroof. Now the shift to a monocoque architecture has been most useful to the Innova in terms of the amount of space you now get in the third row. To start with, the floor has been lowered, which means Toyota has been able to raise this third row. So it means that it's a much more comfortable place to spend time in terms of where the hip point is. So you're not crouched down. Of course, you still sit in a knees-up position, just not as much as before. But as you can see, there's not much underthigh support either. But overall, it's much better than what it was before. So now this is the least amount of space that you get, but of course you will not be using it in this way. But once you see the amount of space there, with a reasonable amount of space for the second row passengers, there's quite a bit of knee room and leg room here. So even adults can spend time here on long journeys. Now you can also recline this row of seats like this. And again, even in this position, it's quite comfortable. The angle of recline is not too extreme, it's just right. Now Toyota says that this space is good for 3 people, but to be honest, if 3 people were to sit here, they would have to be children, although you do get a full 3-point seat belt for the third passenger as well. In terms of other amenities here, you have these cubby holes. They're quite deep, they're quite useful. You have these air vents here on the side, and you have a 12-volt charger here. So even the third row, the Innova Hycross has seen quite an improvement over the Crista. With all 3 rows up, there is about as much space for luggage as in the Crista, although you get a smaller hidden compartment under the floor for small items. Usefully, the third row seats now fold fully flat, opening up a significant 991 litres of boot space. The load lip isn't too high and the space is flat and square, so usability shouldn't be a problem. The Toyota Innova Hycross is only about 20 mm longer and wider than the Crista, but of the same height. Despite these minor increases, the Hycross looks quite a bit more substantial in person, with the wider tracks, the 100 mm longer wheelbase and the shorter overhangs. The added presence also comes from the strong SUV cues that Toyota has gone with for the Innova Hycross. The front is still recognizably an Innova, but the grille has now been made larger and the headlamps are now LEDs in a sharper, more condensed design. The sense carries through with the connected air dam, with the large housings for the DRLs and with the much more heavily contoured bonnet. The SUV theme carries through in profile, where the glasshouse has been refined to drop down after the C-pillar. The shape of the Hycross itself is functional, but the bodywork has now been accented by prominent creases over the fenders and the rear haunches. The 18-inch wheels further add to this sense. Ground clearance too remains unchanged from the Crista. There's a more raked rear windscreen, while the tail lamp unit's wider shape is again clearly inspired by Toyota's SUVs. Now another big addition with the Hycross is that of level 2 ADAS. Now Toyota has tuned the system specifically for India, and in this very short time that we've tried it, it seems to work fairly usefully for our conditions. So for example, the adaptive cruise will quite easily manage to spot lane markings. It'll keep you in the straight line. It'll even handle those curves on our highways pretty naturally. It's the same with the lane departure system as well. That will also spot even fairly faint markings easily. And the intervention when you do cross over, which can sometimes be a bit scary in other cars, that's not the case here. The intervention is mild. You still get to know when the car wants you to take control back. So in that sense, the system is, at least in this early impression, it is a fairly intuitive one, and one that will aid your driving experience like it should. As for passive safety equipment, you get 6 airbags, TPMS, hill start assist, and an electronic parking brake. There is a 360-degree camera too, but its grainy feed limits its functionality. The Toyota Innova Hycross will be an expensive proposition, considering that the Crista's diesel versions will be reintroduced to cater to that specific segment. But it is clear that this really is what a modern Innova should be. Yes, you lose some of the earlier defining traits like the diesel performance and the last degree of rough road ability, but that is replaced by a far more efficient as well as an easier, more relaxing experience, further enhanced by a generally more useful and feature-packed cabin and eye-catching looks.